Well, hello there. It's been a while. Been a few weeks since I've been able to hop on a stream, and we're doing it at a completely out of the blue time. So, welcome if you're joining us. If you're joining for the first time on an effective live stream, this is fun. I'm going to just sit down and I'm going to talk through some things tonight that have been on my mind about productivity and all sorts of stuff like that. So, welcome. I see a couple of you joining. Glad to have you here. I think it'll be pretty fun to do this tonight, so it's been a while. Sorry about that. Streaming, yeah. Anyway, with kids and everything, gets kind of crazy sometimes. So, anyway, welcome to another Think With Me Not Thursday. I'm Justin with Effective. If you're just joining for the first time, I've got a few things that I wanted to talk about regarding productivity in the corporate world. And I just picked up a new iPhone 14 Pro today, and so I wanted to share some of my initial thoughts regards to that. And yeah, so this is just going to be chilling out a little bit for a bit this evening. Feel free to pop your questions in the chat. Yeah, let's just dig into it. So I started a brand new job, brand new venture recently. Not going to get too much into the details of all of that, but it's in an environment that's a bit of a more traditional company. And I realized that a lot of the productivity strategies and tactics that I have been employing over the last few years, working as a freelancer, working in a company that's very heavily asynchronous, yeah, they just weren't really lining up. Plus, the company that I'm working for is pretty restrictive when it comes to its IT policies. And so, even though I've got a Mac for a computer for work, I can't install any of my favorite software that I like to use for productivity, OmniFocus, Things, even Obsidian. So I've got to completely readjust my brain to think about productivity in that sense from a corporate perspective. And so instead of using my favorite Mac-based tools, I've got to use my now new best friends, Microsoft Office and the Microsoft 365 suite of applications like OneNote and To Do and Outlook. I've got experience with this from other corporate jobs that I've worked in the past, but it's been a mindset shift. Let me tell you that much for sure. Being able to use like Microsoft To Do is a completely different mindset for me than using something like OmniFocus for project and task management. Now, I've done a video here on the channel in the past about different types of productivity systems for kinds of careers. And check that one out. It's on recently on the channel, but if you haven't seen that already, what I think is interesting about this job, and I think this goes the case for a lot of corporate jobs, is that like if you're a developer, you're really in maker mode. Like you really need that closed door focus time for long blocks of time to really get any solid, real quality work done. And that's what I was used to in my previous last few years of employment. Well, now that I am working in a different job, my balance has shifted quite a bit. It's less on the maker side and a lot more on the manager side of things too. So while I'm not managing people, there are lots of things that I'm managing, sync up calls and things like that that I have to navigate throughout the day. And so the strategy has to shift for me, which is why I've really been looking more at a traditional getting things done style productivity system. I'm going to pop over onto the screen here in just a second, but I wanted to outline a little bit of why I'm thinking through this first. One, I don't have access, as I mentioned, to any of the traditional getting things done tools that I am used to. I've got to rely on Microsoft To Do I've got to rely on OneNote, things of that sort in that environment. And so I have to approach building this productivity system completely differently. I have to think about it differently. And as a result of that, I'm doing stuff that I haven't done before. And so let's dig into that right now. I've got Obsidian up on the screen here. I'm just going to walk through what the system is that I have built. And it's going to kind of look like this in Obsidian, what it looks like in OneNote, but obviously there are going to be UI differences for it. So I've kind of taken two approaches, and I'm still really experimenting with this. One is I have really stripped the getting things done aspects down to the bare bones. I feel like I'm almost going back to original, like David Allen 1980s getting things done style here, where it's done on paper. I'm just doing it in a OneNote notebook instead. And so this is how I have it laid out. First, I have a note for Minesweep, which is what I'm calling it. It's really just the catch-all note. OneNote has a great widget for iOS where you can just tap on a note, open it right up. It's a recent notes widget. And so it just allows me to capture stuff right into the system right there. This is the workspace note where just stuff kind of goes. And then from there, I really get into the traditional GTD setup. So consider the Minesweep kind of the inbox, but it's a little bit more freeform than it would be like an OmniFocus style inbox. Then I get into really the GTD structure. So I have a projects list. I'll explain these in just a second. A couple of different lists too. Next actions, agendas, and then someday maybe. Each one of these is a separate note inside of a section in OneNote. So the way this would be set up in something like Obsidian is that I would have these each individually linked here that I could just jump into really easily. I'm not going to build all of this out right now. But so taking a look at each of these projects, here's an interesting step back that I have taken in regards to a getting things done style system. I am really used to using a tool like OmniFocus or Todoist and structuring my projects and tasks in it in this hierarchical outline style. So say, you have, you want to make a YouTube video, just an easy analogy to pull out of the air right now. You would say, your project title would be create a YouTube video, and then, or publish a YouTube video would be the outcome that you're looking for, right? Under that, inside of OmniFocus, you would literally have an outline. You would say publish YouTube video, and then your outline of tasks would be, let's see. Yeah, toggle. Apparently my keyboard shortcuts aren't working so well for me today. We'll just do this. This would be your task list then, would be outline the video, shoot, A-roll, so on and so forth. This is what it would look like in OmniFocus. This would be like the top level thing that you would organize and you put it in a folder somewhere inside of OmniFocus and so on. Well, I have a limitation right now where I can only use Microsoft To Do in a web browser. I can't use it in the actual Mac app itself. And so I found that to be a little kludgy for me to use. I might switch back to using it at some point, but right now I'm doing all of this inside of OneNote. So instead of having a projects list where underneath the projects I'm listing all the actions, I'm literally just listing out the projects and then the status of them. So my projects page is structured like this. I have active, backlog, completed. And then I literally am just listing out the projects. Publish, YouTube video, pack bags, or prepare for trip, and so on. And then if I have something that I'm not actively working on right now, it's under the backlog. And if it's completely done, I just move this project listing under the completed section. The reason being is that I'm finding that I don't need to have. It's not a requirement. And again, I'm still experimenting with this, so the jury's a little out on it yet. But I'm experimenting with this idea because I think you don't necessarily need to have the connection that's required there between projects and individual tasks. The way I'm looking at this is that this projects list can be an inspiration for next actions. Now, I know folks like Ryan Murphy, if you follow him at all, he's really prolific in the Obsidian community. He's got an article over on his website that talks about next actions and why, in his productivity system, the way that he tends to think about things is that if he's got a project, he's really only focusing on the one or two next actions that he can do on that instead of planning out further in advance. I'm very much the same way. I have found that 9 times out of 10, when I try to list out a set of actions that I need to take in advance of actually doing them inside of a task manager or something of that sort, I end up finding it to be a little too kludgy to deal with, or that entire task list becomes irrelevant over the course of time. And so this is where I'm getting into disambiguating projects from next action. So we have a projects list, and then the next actions list is the inspiration from those projects of what actions I need to take next to further those efforts forward. So I always have a list to refer back to on what are the big picture kind of buckets of things and objectives or really outcomes that I am pursuing right now. And then those next actions sum up into basically those results that I'm looking for. It's just a list really at this point. And frankly, not too many things on there because I'm still onboarding in my job. Next is the agendas list. This is a list that has a couple of different sections in it where I just have an outline of items where I am, next time I talk with, say, my manager or somebody else that I have a regular meeting with, or need to reach out to for something, I am just putting a list of those things right there. And then someday maybe is what it sounds like. It's a next actions list, or maybe even a projects list, a place where things go that I'm not committed to doing right now. Again, like I mentioned, this is really kind of old school getting things done thinking for it. I really am. I'm wondering if this is going to work out long term for me. Just having a light organizational structure, a place to put things as they come up, the Minesweep bucket, the inbox note, so to say, a list of smaller chunked projects that I am working on, a list of next actions that further those projects, because again, I'm disambiguating projects and actions. Agendas, things that I need to talk about or handle directly with a person, and then a someday maybe list of, well, I'm not focusing on this right now, but it's something I want to get to in the next, well, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe never. Don't really know. So I really think that this is going to be an interesting experiment. I hope to share a little bit more of these results in the future with you, but I'm also looking at trying to implement something like this for a system outside of my work, because I'm in a position right now where I need to have my work stuff separated from my personal stuff, which is, I think, how a lot of us should probably do it. So I'm still working this out if I'm going to do this inside of Obsidian, or if I'm going to do this inside of Notion, or on paper in my bullet journal, because I'm already using that for a lot of work like that. I'd love to hear from you, though. Like, what are you thinking through in terms of productivity these days? Because I think the way that a lot of productivity is talked about is really heavily focused on people who are more creators. The majority of us people who are making YouTube videos and talking about productivity or podcasting about it have made a shift somewhere in their careers. Yeah, maybe they started off in a job somewhere and started doing this on the side, but they've shifted over the course of time into being productivity influencers as kind of their full-time thing, or at least a very, very significant chunk of what they are doing. And I think what's happened is that a lot of productivity advice tends to skew towards, well, do these things because they work really well for people like me. And it makes sense. There's a really heavy emphasis on making things in deep focus. And I mean, Cal Newport is there too. But I think one of the shortcomings in the productivity space is it's not actually representative of what's really happening in the corporate world or in other aspects for people. I really do think after re-entering the corporate world that, well, let's put it this way. I'm rethinking my stance on, is getting things done relevant for 2022 or even 2023? And I really think it actually is in some regards, but the way that I'm thinking about it is that it's getting things done is relevant for people who are who have need to manage lots of smaller details throughout the course of their day. Getting things done is really, really good at that. Or if you have lots of smaller projects or outcomes that you're pursuing, which in a lot of corporate jobs you're trying to chase down that report and get it done by next week on Friday, or work on some kind of research. It does not lend itself towards the type of academic or artistic or creator maker only style focused work that a lot of productivity influencers talk about these days and are writing off systems like getting things done as a result of that. Like, oh, I don't really need that because I don't have, you shouldn't have to use getting things done, right? Because you should only be focusing and getting 4 hours of solid deep work in a day. And so I just, it's really reignited this idea in me of approaching this new job that I have, that there's a different set of productivity strategies and tactics that's highly relevant for people who work in more corporate style environments. And just telling people, yeah, you need to spend 4 hours a day hyper focusing on these things and then trying to eliminate all the other stuff as much as possible, well, a lot of that might be out of your control. So I think it's something important to keep in mind for myself and for other productivity creators out there too. There are so many different aspects to productivity and so many different types of jobs, types of people who are approaching things who need help with productivity. And so I think this month, my content on the channel is really heavily focused on Obsidian, partly because we're launching the Obsidian Made Simple version 2 of the course in a few weeks. And so I want to kind of revisit some of those topics to talk about Obsidian and why I'm still using it. What are some of my favorite things about it? What's my workflow look like in Obsidian, as well as my broader PKM workflow too. But I think really next month, I want to spend some time digging into why I think getting things done is still relevant in 2022 and for next year as well. And then also looking at, how do you navigate productivity in a more corporate style environment? What are some of the strategies that you need to employ when you don't have full control over your schedule, when you don't have autonomy over everything, when you can't just start pushing back and saying, no, I want a pull-based work system instead of you pushing work onto me all of the time. It often doesn't work like that. So how do you navigate those environments and still be productive, but then also still find yourself in a place where you're living a more balanced life? Because that's really what I'm all about, is helping people find balance in their lives, or a good cadence. Let's put it that way. I guess I should stop using the word balance because I'm not a fan of balance. I don't think you could really have a balanced life. Life is often out of balance in certain ways. But you can find a good cadence where for a season, you're moving in a direction and investing energy in certain aspects of life where it's a healthy thing for you. And then maybe a season changes and then it's not healthy for you anymore. So anyway, that's big picture stuff. But I am really excited about this new season for me. Lots of changes going on as a result of this, lots of changes to my productivity system. And another thing that's just changed today, hey, Nicholas, you're catching the stream. I'm streaming, almost 9 o'clock at night. Finally made it work. But yeah, anyway, the other thing that's changed recently is that I just got the new iPhone 14 Pro. So I got it in the, if you can see, probably can't see it on screen here. It looks black right now, but it's actually the deep purple. My wife made a comment saying that it looks like cobalt purple. Yeah, this lighting does not show the purple at all, but it's totally purple. I love the color. I think it's pretty cool. And the phone is pretty awesome as well. Before I dig into that, but it's Earl is mentioning in chat, for work, I spend less time organizing. It feels futile. Others won't use it. When I leave, it's done. I just need to be able to find the content and be proficient with the tools that they utilize. 100% agree. There is I think, especially in an environment that's highly collaborative and you're working with other people and you just have the work that needs to get done, there is a law of diminishing returns when it comes to organizing stuff. Which is why, like, popping back over to Obsidian here, which is why I've tried to keep my organizational structure really lightweight. It just kind of gives me different ways to look at stuff. I don't want to get too complicated with it because, one, I don't have a clear enough picture for the work right now to make something more complex. And two, I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot and I'm really drawn to this idea and I've wanted to experiment with it. So we'll see how it pans out. I'll report back at some point in the future, hopefully, and share if this worked out or not. I'm a big fan of experimentation, and if things work, awesome. And if they don't, well, try something else, right? But yeah, I want to get into some thoughts too on the iPhone 14. I'm trying to figure out if there's a reasonable way to put a productivity spin on this, but I don't think so. But it's just something on my mind because I've been messing around with it today. I just got it today. I'm coming from the iPhone 12 Pro, which was literally the heaviest phone I have ever used in my life. Like, I remember using that for the first couple of weeks and I was like, man, this stainless steel is just hurting my hand because it was so heavy. I got used to it after a while, and actually picking this up, it's still stainless steel, but it's actually decent weight-wise. It feels a little bit lighter than the 12 Pro. Two big things that I've noticed about it so far. One, the ProMotion display is incredible. I started using it for the first time earlier today. I was like, wow, this feels so nice. I mean, ProMotion, if you're not aware of what that is, it's Apple's 120 hertz refresh rate displays. And it makes everything feel buttery smooth on the screen. There's no jarring. There's no weird feeling of it. All the animations and scrolling just feels really, really smooth on the display. If you haven't used the ProMotion display before, you'll love it when you do. But this is the first time, I think last year maybe was the first time it was in the iPhone. So I hadn't messed with an iPhone 13. I love that about the iPhone 14 Pro. It makes it feel like a brand new device, even though it's only 2 years later. And Apple has really just been slowly iterating on it. The other thing that is interesting about it, that I noticed right away, is the camera bump. So if you remember, it's like really, really chunky out there. If you remember right, the iPhone 6 first introduced the camera bump and everybody was freaking out about it. And then I think the first phone that really leaned into the camera bump was the iPhone 7. It just made a nice big single bump on the back of it. And I thought it looked great, and it worked well. But this is like, I mean, it is really out there if you see it. Really out there. I was just struck by it. It's almost like a little pop socket in some ways on the back of the phone. I find myself just naturally resting my hand there, and that's probably by design, in part by Apple, but I think it's just interesting. I'm a fan of tech, obviously. And what's really interesting too is that starting this new job, I'm not in a highly technical role, and so I honestly have been finding myself wanting more technical things to mess around with after the fact. So in the evenings and stuff. I have a Mac Mini over here on a shelf, and I used to do some crypto stuff. I'm not doing it anymore. So I have a bunch of hard drives. And I set that Mac Mini up now to be a server, and I've got some of those hard drives hooked up to it. So I've got a Time Machine server and everything hooked up. I'm in the process of getting it up, kind of set up as a backup and data hub for the house. So it's just a little easier to handle things long term. The other thing that's going to be happening too as a result of this new job is some more travel. And from a productivity sense of things, I haven't done a lot of work on the road, to be honest with you. So that's going to be a new thing that I'm going to have to learn and figure out how to do. One thing I did do is bought this new bag. This is the Air Travel Pack 3. It's the small one, so it comes in two sizes. One is, I think, 38 liters, something around there, and this one's 29 or something. I have to remember the exact specs of it. So this is the smaller version. I got the smaller one so I can use it as a carry-on personal item. But it's got so much storage inside of this. I have a Timbuktu messenger bag, and it's the same footprint as it size-wise, but I can fit a ridiculous amount more of things inside of it. So it'll be interesting to see. My main goal with it is for like 1 or 2 night business trips that I'm going on. Can I pack everything in this bag without having to take carry-on? The other reason that I got it too